Ladies and gentlemen, football is officially back, and we're going to wrap this U20 mini-series up today with a much-anticipated Q&A. Like I said, we're back at it. Bundesliga resumed last weekend. People are divided. Some people appreciate the fact that it's back and could care less that there's rare scenarios, empty stadiums, no fans, no atmosphere. I'm part of that group. I do not care. I'm so happy to have it back. And there's other people that are critiquing it. It's just not the same, no atmosphere, not match fit, not sharp. Listen, it's going to get there. I'm excited. La Liga's already started full training. Premiership clubs are starting to train. The Serie A is starting to train. I think the MLS groups are starting to do individual work. So, guys, we're going to have it back here domestically, hopefully live soon, and then overseas as well. So, I'm buzzing. I'm excited. I just want to get straight to this Q&A. There's plenty of good questions. I think there's 40-something questions, so buckle up, and here we go. Question number 1 is from William Sutherland. It says, thanks, Brian, original 343 coaching member. Well, question for you is, where Alex Mendes in this whole picture? He seemed like he was coming along in the last World Cup, playing big minutes. Oh yeah, you should be on the U.S. staff coaching our boys. All right, I'll take that. Hopefully other people are listening, William. So Alex Mendes was part of the last U20 cycle. That's why he's not included in this group, to be clear. But so we can wrap this around a little bit and get this back to this U20 group. I think I want to share the importance of being in the U20s, being in a World Cup, the stage that brings with it. For example, what it did for a player like Alex Mendes, right? Who had a high-level World Cup, had some of the best clubs in the world there spotlighting, had a lot of clubs bidding for his services, and ended up with a unique and great situation for his future at Ajax. So we could take that extreme and how important it is to have a coach that selects these types of footballers so that those opportunities arise for them in their future. So Tab did an excellent job of that. You know, we could talk about Richie and his opportunities playing U20 football, being scouted and seen by PSV and moving on. And we could flip the script and talk about how it could affect you negatively if we don't have the right circumstance with the right players selected and have such a poor showing like we did at the previous U17 World Cup, right? Gio Reyna, for example, had he not been signed for Dortmund ahead of the World Cup based on his performance, based on the team surrounding him. Do you think anybody picks up Gio after that performance? Difficult, right? I wouldn't sign him for my Sunday League team after what he did in those 3 games in Brazil. But for context, we need to have the strongest team, and that goes back to the Gio Uli argument that I painted that picture a few episodes back. All right, I hope that answered your question. Next one is Sergio, what do you think of Brian Ko? Kind of reminds me of Yaya Torre, big but physical. Oof. Also, if you had to choose a starting 11 for the men's team, if the World Cup was this summer, what would it be? So Sergio, on the U.S. senior team question, I'm not going to touch that yet because it doesn't pertain to the U20s. Good questions, though. Regarding Brian Ko, I know him really well. I've seen Brian play for several years since his DC United Academy days. Big, strong, physical, like you mentioned, a la Yaya Touré. I can see why you make that comparison. I liken him a little bit more to what I said about Weston McKennie in last week's episode. On the athletic side, very good. Brian may potentially be better than Weston on the physical side because his frame is unique. He's grown a ton since everybody's last seen him. I have the luxury of seeing him, the youth national teams. I had the luxury of seeing him actually in Europe when he was training with a club. So I think he's a player that could have a good career for himself, could make a good jump, and we'll see where that goes. In terms of comparing it to Yaya Touré, that's difficult. We talk about levels. Let me give a Yaya Touré example or an analogy. I recall him being a interesting player for FC Barcelona because he has incredible physical attributes. He has very, very good technical attributes, and he has an incredible soccer IQ, brains. In came Sergio Busquets, 20 years old, promoted from the second team, from third division, and he made the jump with Pep to the first team. Pep pretty much said, hey, this is the guy. And we look at Busquets' profile like this, a twig. Athletically, nowhere near Yaya Touré. And we talk about how good Yaya is on the technical side and the brain side. Imagine how farly superior Sergio Busquets was to sit a player like that down. We talk about levels. That's incredible level and clarity in terms of what you want. And bottom line, you can't sacrifice the brains and the technique for the physical. Never. That's something that I think I've made very clear, and that's something that I'm sure I'll touch on more throughout this Q&A. I hope you answered your question, man. Brian Cahill brings the athletic component, doesn't bring the other two components. He's not somebody that I think is going to be impactful in terms of graduating us to the next level, like I suggested. All right, Sergio, good question. Well, here's a long one. Buckle up. E pluribus unum. Are you in communication with Gregg Berhalter about sharing the love with Efrain Alvarez? I'm going to tell you, there's a million questions, so no, I'm not in contact with Gregg. How realistic is it that you win? Is it to win his heart back to U.S. soccer? Well, I think it's realistic. He's not cap tied by Mexico, and it's wide open season. If we want to graduate, if we want these types of players, somebody that enriches our player pool, we go make a play like I suggested in the Efraim episode. Has anyone spoken with Nike about Efraim? These are all insane questions, and I have no idea. I would think they would want to make a gifted player like Efraim to an Adidas-dominated market. Can the U20 team succeed without Efraim, Gio, and Uli? Now, here we go. The short, sweet answer is no. Listen, we're talking about arguably the three best players in terms of our attacking football. You subtract the three best players of any team's attack in any sport, you're going to suffer. So, no, we will not have success. We will not graduate without our three best players. That's why it is imperative. No conflicts, obviously, coming when it comes to U20 World Cup football and the senior men's national team. Those three guys should be on the field for us. Thank you, Brian, for your excellent analysis and explanation. Like so many American sports fans, I'm fairly new to falling in love with soccer and joining the world party. I especially enjoyed your tactical magnet board breakdown. I would like to see more tactical conversations. It reminds me of what John Madden did for the NFL fans. Thank you. Geez, hopefully I get my own video game, man, and I get it, 1% to where John Madden succeeded in terms of his career with football. Brian, I hope for continued success with your coaching career. Thank you for that. You are making a difference, elevating soccer in the USA. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. Marco Marquez, where do I go to get the type of knowledge you have? Oh my goodness, Marco, are you taking the piss? I feel like you're taking the piss at me. I don't even know where to begin. You don't want my soccer knowledge. You don't want to watch hundreds and thousands of hours and games per week and have no social life and sacrifice, while working 70, 80-hour work weeks for the last 20 years in the coaching realm. You don't want that, okay? Trust me. Interesting question. I hope I helped you answer. You do not want this soccer knowledge and this obsession and this passion. Rocco Shu, are you going to break down the senior team depth in the future? Rocco Shu, there's a lot of people inquiring about that. It's something that I will strongly consider as we move forward to our next chapter, our next series, in terms of dissecting and talking football. Good question. Next one is Emily. What do you know of Danny Leyva? I know a lot about Danny Leyva, actually. I don't even know how far back this goes. I would say 6, 7, 8 years when he was 9, 10 years old. I would do some methodology clinics in the Las Vegas area for certain clubs. And by coincidence, the club where Danny Leyva played, his father, who was a coach, his coaching staff came to these clinics. So they gravitated to following our 3-4-3 methodology, our possession-based football, and they implemented it within their team and their club. And obviously, it took an indirect effect on Danny Leyva's development. If I fast forward, I attempted to bring Danny Leyva. His parents contacted me to bring him to the LA Galaxy. Unfortunately, we did not have a housing component to our club at the time, so we missed out on Danny. He ended up in Seattle, who could house him. Just bottom line, in terms of what he brings to the table, he brings the attributes that we discuss to advances in global football. Soccer IQ brain, Danny has a ton of that. He sees the game, he reads the game, he moves the rock. He has very, very good technique. So he fits the profile. I think it's somebody that can make a late push in terms of playing up a cycle. On the athletic side, he's like Sergio Busquets. He's a snail, and people are knocking him and critiquing and saying, oh, he may not translate because of that. I strongly disagree. I think Danny has a bright future ahead of him. If that answers your question, great player, great prospect. Here we go. Next question is Michael Goldberg. It says, I was wondering if any of the following players have a realistic chance to make this U20 roster. George Bello, Danny Leyva, Gianluca Busio, Alfonso Campo Chavez, Adam Saldana. All of them are O2s except for Leyva, who is an O3. So listen, I think everyone has a chance to make the roster. It'll all depend on the direction we're heading. If we're here and we're ready to graduate us to the next level, we need technical players and smart soccer players that understand the game to get us to the next level in global context. If we are going to remain the status quo, then all these guys you named have an equal opportunity to get on the roster, right? Most of these guys, it's more athleticism than it is soccer IQ and technique. So I've made my choices clear, based on the leadership's message and the federation saying that we want to play a possession-based style, that we want to advance and grow as a footballing nation. It'd be very difficult for some of these guys to make the team, right? We'll know. Time will tell the direction we're heading, and we'll see who gets selected and who doesn't. Good question, Michael Goldberg. Alexander Schaefer says, what adjustments would you make if Gio isn't on the team? Good question. I think it's very simple. Jose Gallegos is the only candidate to supplement a big loss like that of Gio. Jose Gallegos, I've already described, very creative, wants the ball, technical, difference maker in the final third, has to polish up his final product, his finishing, his final ball. But I think, we drop maybe a little bit in quality because of Gio's experiences. That's the only thing that Jose lacks, is the international experience that Gio brings, the plethora of that he brings, obviously now playing first team football. Jose's just getting started, but I think it's an interesting player, somebody who I'm equally excited about. There's a lot of buzz around him. So I think Jose's going to bring a lot to this U20 group. He's in if Gio's not part of this group. Let's see. Jake Castillo, next question is, there were talks of Cole Bassett trialing at Arsenal. From what you've seen, so you think he has the quality to make it at a top team in the EPL? Jake Castillo, I don't know if he was trialing at Arsenal. I think there's a link between Colorado's ownership group and Arsenal's ownership group. I'm not entirely sure about that. The short, sweet answer is no, okay? We're talking about Arsenal, we're talking about Spurs, we're talking about Man City, Liverpool, Manchester United. Difficult, guys. Difficult to make one of those teams. You have to be an incredible all-around footballer. You have to have something special about you. I kind of alluded that to Cole Bassett. While he made my depth here, I think he is a good prospect as an 8. I think he could have a good career here, professional career in MLS, and maybe make a jump overseas. I don't think he's making a jump to a top 6 Premier League side, to answer your question. All right, good question, though, from Jake. Here we go, another long one, okay? Bear with me. Christian Ott said, a question/ramble related to Gio and Uli. I go on a lot of these rambles. You mentioned in an earlier video that they can't be above U20 cycle. While I agree that it's ideal for their development, isn't the issue that they are probably already key players in our senior team's attacking pool? You mentioned great names that did the U20 World Cup and weren't too big for it, but their senior teams were already good enough without them for the time being. If there aren't real conflicts with the U20 and senior camps, then I guess it's fine to keep them with the 20s. But I don't know how comfortable I feel about the senior team going to qualifying with our winger pool of Pulisic, Morris, Areola, Boyd, Baird, and Lewis. I want to know that someone could come off the bench and make something happen if things are going poorly. And I don't think I get that from a lot of our backups. This is a fair argument. Love the series and would love to hear your thoughts on this. Christian, I couldn't agree with you more, okay? If we go from that context and there are conflicts and this is our pool of wingers, let's remove Pulisic, who is the lock guy, lock starter. There's no touching Pulisic. The rest of the guys you rattled off, Morris, Baird, Lewis, Boyd, and Paulo Areola, aren't guys that are going to graduate us to the next level. Gio and Uli are both, in my opinion, above those guys, especially in that context. So, yes, if there are conflicts, Gio and Uli should be with the senior men's team. But usually FIFA does not have conflicting calendars. This pandemic may alter that. So, short answer, if there's no conflicts, U20 football 100%, like I argued before. If there is a conflict and it's World Cup qualifying and that ticket to Qatar is on the line, then I want these guys with our senior men's team. All right, short, sweet answer. Good question, good hypothetical scenario from you, Christian. I hope I answered that. Sergio asks, what region in America do you think can produce the best players and why? Also, so how do we get soccer into the hood? Okay, let's tackle the first one. I will speak, Sergio, from my experience growing up here in the Southern California and Los Angeles in particular, I think there's a population of, I don't know, 13, 15 million. We can have our own youth national teams, senior men's national teams, and be amongst the world's elite based on the talent pool here alone, okay? That's just a reality. If there's good work being done in terms of identification, if there's a vision in place, when we have everything aligned, I don't know, I'll use a club football type thing, Atletico Bilbao, where it's a small little region in Spain, but yet they somehow have their ideas clear and their vision clear, and they produce consistently high-level footballers that play at the La Liga level. On an international scale, I could talk about Uruguay and their 2 million population and what they've produced consistently over the years, right? We can talk about most recently Croatia and what they did with their little population and producing footballers and getting to a World Cup final. So absolutely, I think Los Angeles, incredible region. Now imagine that if we supplement the talent base here with the talent all across the country in the good markets and the top markets, the Texas markets, the Dallas market, Houston, Florida, New York, the big markets. And listen, talent is not discriminated anywhere. There could be talent all across our massive, incredible country. And listen, I think we just got to scour it, have a clear identity and vision in terms of what we want, select technical players, select soccer smart, savvy players, and select athletic players if that could get the perfect trio. But you cannot sacrifice the other two aspects just for the physical side. We've done that for eternity, and it's led us to being mediocre/average. All right, I hope that's clear for you. How do we get it into the hood? Man, your guess is as good as mine. Culturally, it's a lot different here. I think we don't have futsal courts. We don't have pickup soccer all over the place. I do see it when I drive around town, in local parks. I think the Latino community just goes after they get off work and they just play pickup ball, grown men like myself. But in terms of the young guns, that isn't something that's prevalent here in the United States. And the reality is I don't think it's aligned in terms of young guys wanting to get out of the hood, right? So for that example, NBA players, NFL players, Major League Baseball players who were grown up in those environments, right? They wanted a way out. So their way out was the big payday that those sports offer. If we think about MLS by comparison, you're making chump change compared to what you make as a professional football player or basketball player. So I think most of those elements in those cultures, they're going to choose that route, right? So it's an interesting argument, man. I would love to have everybody playing on the street here like they do in Argentina or South America or south of the border or in most European countries, all right? Good questions, Sergio. I went on one of my epic rants. I'm tired. I'm going to take a little swig. Ooh, the next one, my goodness. Excuse me, Joe3628 says, why would we want him back? Do you really think that there aren't more players like him? We don't need Efra. We'll produce more like him. So, wow, I don't even know where to start with that. I will say, from my experience, they don't grow on trees, okay? Talents of the level of Efra, they don't grow on trees. If I rewind back to when I first saw this player, his older brother was playing for me in a national competition. It was halftime. I think I've discussed this before. My assistant coaches were like, after I gave my team talk, look at this. And you know how kids run out at halftime to kick the ball in the goal and try and score, and their family members or whoever gets in goal. There's 5 goalies at a time. There's a bunch of balls lined up. This kid, he was this big. He must have been 5, 6 years old, if that. He was hitting bombs from 30, 40 yards out. Just boom, clipping in bombs, okay? He is a unique talent. Let's not even talk about the 10 years under my watchful eye in terms of getting into the right environment, into the right culture, intensity, learning team tactics, continue to develop his soccer brain and technique. This is a unique player. If we had more like him, I wouldn't say let's go start a war and bring him back from Mexico. So guys, obviously, again, the message is clear. I want us to graduate to the next level. Every single person in our country has that same interest and voices that. So we need the best players. Efra fits into that role. He is a unique talent, a unique player, doesn't grow on trees. I hope that answered your question, Joe. Man, you are nuts if you think we have more Efras. Southern Gentleman. Also, what are your thoughts on how, where, and when Efra could get into a better environment? Would you recommend Bundesliga or Dutch academies or other? So, I'm not sure I understand if you're trying to connect Efra with being in a Bundesliga or Dutch academy. I'm going to treat it as separate questions there. I don't know Efra's situation, to be honest. I don't know how long he has on his contract here in the league. Yes, there are better environments than being here. That's just the real answer. Okay, it's more competitive environments if we talk about that overseas. So I think Efra has a bright future, and that's a question for somebody else. Would you recommend Bundesliga or Dutch academies or other? I think, in my experience, having gone and see that, they are very professional environments. They have very clear ideas in terms of their player profiles and what they want for their first teams. And they do a really, really good job, right? Both the German youth and their movement over the last 10, 15 years, and the Dutch and their historical accomplishments developing world-class players. So good environments, both those countries. Next one is Jack Fritzadelphia is legendary, says, biggest positional weakness in the U20 pool. Jack, I'll just call you Jack. Jack, I've made it very clear. Center back. We don't have any, okay? We have Leo, we have Owen. Everything after that is the same old, super athletic players. No technique, no soccer brains, can't play out of situations, can't see situations, can't break lines, can't pass, don't feel comfortable on the ball, any type of little pressure, turnover machines. So we need to get better at developing those types of players, right? From an early age, they have to be ID'd, they have to be worked on technically, they have to be worked on tactically, they have to understand the game, and we just don't have enough of those types of players. So in our pool here, that is clearly the positional weakness. I think I answered that earlier, but very good question. Scott Ferris, do you have confidence that Hudson U.S. Soccer can actually choose the right team? Well, Scott, I don't know Anthony Hudson at all on a personal level. I think I made that clear that I haven't followed his trajectory at Colorado and MLS or previously when he's working in New Zealand, I believe. So I don't know the answer to that question. I think time will always tell. And in terms of heading in the right direction, it will be a great indicator soon, maybe as early as January 2021 when soccer resumes on the international level, I believe, if we're heading in the right direction or if we're stuck in the mud. All right, good question though. Marshall Duncan, what is the biggest factor between Uli and Alex and some of your former players, i.e. Charlie? Charlie, I assume you mean Carlos Anguiano. What allowed them to get to higher levels thus far? Was it mental, physical, technical, or some combination of factors? Thanks. So Marshall, good question. I think in a case like Charlie, for example, he was born in the wrong country, right? We talk about the qualities that are always looked for here stateside, and it's always athlete first. So if you look at that player profile, for example, he's not an athlete. He's 5'5", at best 5'6". He's not extremely fast per se in terms of running the 40-yard dash, but Charlie could cover ground. Charlie can play football. He understands the game. Uli and Alex, obviously a little bit better on the athletic side. So in short, I'm going to keep beating this drum. We look for athletes, and a lot of players that have come through my pipeline are extremely intelligent, understand the game. They've been taught to play that way, and they're extremely technical because it's been in the environment since they were 8, 9 years old. So those are the players that have been bypassed over the years. Those are the ones that I've argued are overlooked. And the reality is, there's also other external factors. Think about it. Teenage boys. I've worked with them for 20 years, okay? There's this thing called tasting life. What does that mean? Going out with your friends, going to parties, meeting girls. Yes, females are a massive distraction for young footballers, and you always have to make a decision in your life. This doesn't necessarily mean it was Charlie, but a lot of the players that have come through my groups were extremely talented, and they just chose a different pathway in their life. They tasted life and they enjoyed it. I think a lot of us are guilty of that, okay? But bottom line is you have to sacrifice a shit ton if you want to be an elite level footballer. And if you talk about Uli and Alex, these are players that have sacrificed everything. Friends, parties, their childhood, being with their families now. They're overseas as 18 since they were 18 years old or even younger. Travel, youth national teams, all over the globe traveling, not hanging out with their friends. They didn't have normal childhoods. And you look at, forget Uli and Alex, you look at the high-level elite footballers, the world-class guys, the ones that, have biographies and books, they all have the same storyline. They didn't get to enjoy life. So you have to make a decision, and you have to sacrifice a ton. Unfortunately, it's not for everybody. And I hope that answers your questions. Marshall Duncan, good question though. Tim Cannon, why has Berhalter been so unsuccessful, and what is the deal with his player selection? Seems like he selects a bunch of grinders who don't have the IQ or skill to satisfy the tactics. It all depends, Tim. It all depends on what you determine success is or isn't. You know what I mean? Usually with a national team head coach, not just here in the United States, but across the globe, it's usually 4-year cycles. Some have the ability to stay in the hot seat for 4 years. Some get the axe after a few bad performances. So let's give Gregg time. Let's give him his process. Let's give him his World Cup cycle, and let's revisit that. If it was a success or not. I think he said the right things. We need to graduate and move in the right direction. Let's see. Let's start spotlighting his player selection, because he inherited a group. You just can't start whacking every single guy that he inherited that have countless caps and experiences. So we will see how he integrates this new crop of young talent and retires some of the guys that don't fit the attributes of play possession-based football, like I suggested. Next guy is James Stitt. Given only what you know, everyone is fit and yet still projecting hypothetical player growth. Who would make your your U.S. men's national team 2022 World Cup squad if you were in Gregg Berhalter's shoes? Man, oh man. All right, James, it's off topic. It's not pertaining to the U20s. I'm not in Gregg's shoes. So let's talk about the U20s. Time will tell. We're going to see here shortly, like I said, what the player selection looks like, what direction we want to go. Do we want to graduate? Do we want to stay stagnant and just continue to pick athletes that don't get it, that don't see the game, that can't play football? And it's important to know, while we discuss that it's important to have a collective group of 11 players and not variety, not 4 or 5 athletes and 4 or 5 technical players. That doesn't work either. I could talk all day about that. If you have one weak link, it doesn't work in terms of having a possession-based system, in terms of bossing football, bossing identity, boss games. You look at the world's elite on the international level and on the club level, they very rarely, if ever, have one weak link. And if they do, on the technical side or on the IQ side, he stands out like a sore thumb. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, we'll tackle more of our senior men's national team as we move forward, hopefully in the near future. Jason Frey says, if Richie Ledesma and Alex Mendes were paired together, would Tyler Adams be the type of DCM central midfielder you'd want behind them? Also, do you plan on getting back into the coaching once the pandemic situation clears up? Thank you for all that you've done. Really enjoying these videos a lot. Jason Frey, thank you for watching the videos. Absolutely, I would love to be back on the sideline. It's been a little over a year in terms of being off the sidelines, and I miss it, man. That's what I was put on this earth to do. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully a professional situation arises that is aligned with my vision, and we can get back on the pitch and do what we do best. In terms of Richie, Alex, and Tyler Adams, not really on the U20 topic, but you're onto something. That's looks like a very interesting midfield there. Next question is Nathan David. It says, if we decided to play a different system, let's say a Red Bull or Liverpool like pressing system, do you think we have the players to accommodate that? How would you build your 11? Or is your system the only real one you feel we are capable of? So Nathan David, first off, you talk about it like it's my system. It's not my system, okay? It's the U.S. men's national team identity now. That's what leadership has stated. They want to play possession-based football. They want to boss games. They want to create goal-scoring opportunities, destabilize. They want to be a high-pressing team. So it's not mine. You mentioned Liverpool. You mentioned Red Bull. These are teams that fit those criteria. Those are teams that boss games. Yeah, they may be a little bit more vertical. They may trade punches a little bit more than, FC Barcelona or Man City, but still, they have players that fit the criteria. They have technical players. You don't think Liverpool bosses games? Maybe they don't boss it when they play Man City. Maybe they don't boss it if they play Barca, but every single other time they step on the field with that roster, they boss games, all right? let's take an example. You know, if you want to substitute 2 or 3 players that are just athletes and not technical, I don't know, let's talk about our U.S. men's national team. You want to throw in an Aaron Long, a Weston McKennie, and a Jordan Morris, just athletic guys on Liverpool or on Red Bull, then I don't think they boss games. I don't think they have the success they do. I don't think they lift trophies. So to answer your question, I hope that helps. Where are you at here? I hope that helped answer your question, Nathan. I think you have 2 or 3 more. Next one is, given the group of players you picked for the roster and style of play you desire, what would your training sessions and camp look like? I hear limited amount of time with players as a reason why Gregg has issues with the USMNT. So, again, saving grace. This is similar to what I just said with Nathan. It's not my style of play. Well, listen, this is what we need to do as a country to graduate with the world's elite. Okay, in terms of sessions and excuses, oh, we don't have enough field or contact hours. That's nonsense. The teams, the international managers that have implemented identities over the course of time have always done a good job of doing so, maximizing every single minute you have with the players and knowing how to transmit that onto the training pitch. In my living room, man, I don't have a training pitch here to go over with you. But listen, if I wanted to have a team that bosses games, positional possession games are key. But little details, what part of the field, how are we trying to hurt a certain opponent? All that comes into play, destabilizing, creating numerical superiority within positional possession games. Hey, if we want to be a pressing team, stress within these exercises, the repress, recovering possession right away. Get that into your team's DNA. If we want to be a team that bosses games, I went over on the tactic boards about building out. Have solutions when teams man mark you or high press you. Don't just say, hey, we're going to change now. We're being pressed. We're going to go a little bit more direct. Obviously, there is so much to discuss when it comes to implementing your identity within your own team. But these are things that are done by the world's elite, and that's something that we will continue to monitor and see what Gregg and his staff do with our USMNT. USMNT fan, here we go. Which player does Leo Sepulveda remind you of, and why do you think he is different from any other center back we ever had? So, I don't know if I touch on this detail, but Leo Sepulveda reminds me of Clement Lenglet on the ball. Okay, this is the French left center back from FC Barcelona. Smooth. He sees it. He reads the game. He could play line breaking passes. He could switch the point of attack. 50, 60-yard diagonal ball on the money. He could filter passes into the midfield. No problem. He gets pressed. He's calm. He knows his options ahead of time. He could pass out of it. He could dribble out of it. That's the type of player that Leo is. Now, based on all those qualities I just rattled off, how many players can you think of that we've ever had play center back that has those types of qualities? Historically, any single time we're under any type of pressure, we can't handle it. Ball gets played to the wrong foot. Ball gets played behind a player. Ball gets played out of bounds. Ball gets played direct. Players could not handle it because they were not developed to handle it. So Leo is a different breed in that regard. I think I tackled it all. And the other unique thing about Leo is, that's on the offensive side. On the defensive side, he is nasty. He wants to end your life. Okay, from the first minute to the ref blows the whistle at the final 90-plus minutes, he wants to destroy you. He wants to impose himself. He wants to set the tone. You know, I compare him to like Nico Otamendi, who is a terrible soccer player, okay, in terms of playing out. He's learning a little bit under Pep now, but in terms of bringing it, he destroys you. He's nasty. Sergio Ramos is nasty. He doesn't care. Look what he did to Mo Salah in the Champions League final to knock Liverpool and their top player out immediately. That was no accident. I'm not saying Leo's dirty like that, but he's nasty. He understands. Pepe, the Real Madrid Portuguese assassin. These components are part of Leo's game as well. All right, so it's a very unique player. I'm excited for everybody to get to see him, and I think he's got a very bright future. Nathan David. This guy gets, hey, I didn't know you get more than one question. I could be like at the daily coronavirus press briefings and no, that's it. Next question. No, Nathan, I'm kidding. How would you explain a player like Joshua Kimmick who has moved positions over time? You say that players don't improve or change a lot in their late teens, early 20s, but isn't he a recent example of a player who is still growing tactically and technically to do that? So Nathan, excellent question. Listen, Joshua Kimmick, technique and brains, top. top, athletically good, very good, solid. He was like that when he was 18, 19, okay? When Pep was managing him at Bayern Munich. And he has graduated. Yeah, he could come inside and play central midfield because he has a brain and he has technique. He could play right back. I'm sure he could play center back in a pinch, right? As it pertains to our U20 player pool and our U.S. men's national team pool, we talk about having a player like Kobe. Kobe could play center mid. Why? Incredible technique, incredible soccer IQ. He could handle it. He could play the 6, the 8, no problem for our U20 pool at that level as well. So these are the types of players that we want to graduate us forward. On the flip side, I don't know, talk about having an Anthony Robinson that a lot of people are hyping up and saying is a tremendous player, again, based on pedigree, because he plays at Wigan in the championship and has, I don't know how many starts and games played, and because allegedly AC Milan wanted to buy him. Listen, this is not the type of player that can do these things like Joshua Kimmick. So to answer your question, bottom line is, Kimmick was a phenom, okay? Technically and brain, he has it. That's why he's able to play multiple positions. And if we continue to graduate, I don't know, Leo Messi, Pep Guardiola, in multiple interviews, discusses Leo Messi, says, hey, this is the best player. I could play him at center back, at the 6, at the 8, at the 10, 0 issues, okay? Why? Because he's got brain, technique. End of story. If I talk about our U.S. players, I think Gio and Uli can easily play in central midfield as a 6, an 8, or the 10. I think Gio and Uli, if we ask them to, can play outside back because they get it. They have technique and they have brains. Now, as we graduate to the senior level, it's very difficult. And what Joshua Kimmick does is unique and special. I can't recall too many instances of players doing that. So bottom line, Nathan, you got to have technique, you got to have brains if you aspire to anything. He had that when he was that young, and he continues to develop it further. I'm talking about if you have 0 brains and 0 technique, you ain't catching up later. There's no way in hell. All right, I hope that's a little bit more clear for you. Let me take a swig, but we have Andrew Severin next. Hey Brian, I was wondering if you could provide some insight as to where players we've deemed work rate midfielders fit into the big picture. While I subscribe to the idea that much of what is accomplished with a high motor can be easily done by great technique and reading of the game, I have trouble completely writing off players like Paxton Pomykal or Lucas Torreira. Do you think there's a place for a player profile on a truly dominant team? Yeah, man. Hey, good question, Andrew. So, absolutely, there's always a place for a Lucas Torreira type, okay? We're talking about the Arsenal midfielder. We're talking about what a midfield he has for Uruguay with Valverde and Betancourt from Juventus and Real Madrid, respectively. So, and I could see how you compare Paxton to a Torreira type because he has that tenacity, that bite in his game. Hopefully, he can get to that level sooner than later. So, no, to answer your question, for sure, there's a place on roster for these types of players. Even at FC Barcelona, consistently, they bought Alex Song, this Cameroonian destroyer, to come in and be a different profile and see out games. They brought in Paulinho, the Brazilian. They brought from China just a specimen to help them see out and have a different type of midfielder to see out games. They didn't bring him in to start. They didn't bring him to replace Busquets or Iniesta or Xavi per se. Okay, most recently Arturo Vidal, not really the Barca profile of player, even though he's fit in like a glove there. So there is absolutely room for this, and I've named it in the U20 episodes. I named Oscar Cervantes, right? This Casemiro type bruiser. Hey, he can knock the ball, but he's also this type of player who could come in and help you see out a result, or in a World Cup situation scenario, play a game when we need to, play a more physical opponent. I don't know, match day 3, if we've won our first 2 games. Yes, Oscar Cervantes is good technical, he's good tactical, and he can step in and do a job. So absolutely, to answer your question, there is room for that in a possession-based team, but we have to have limited of those guys. We can't have half the roster composed of these guys, and it can't be the starters per se. All right, Andrew, good question though, man. I like that. Nathan David is back. My goodness. What's the reason you would dismiss a player like Charlie Kellman? Is it his club situation? Since you said you haven't really taken a look at him, can we take that much from a club situation? So first off, Nathan David, I am not influenced like most by a club situation. I don't care if a player is playing college soccer, Sunday League soccer, or Champions League soccer, okay? Somebody has to fit the criteria to advance us as a footballing nation, have to have brain, have to have technique. When it comes to Charlie Kellman, I think you misinterpreted. I said I didn't give him a rating, not that I didn't rate him, because I haven't seen him play live. And I feel like it's irresponsible of me to give a detail or compare him to Pepe when I haven't seen Charlie play live. I've seen, like you've seen, YouTube videos and things like that. With the rest of the pool, I have pretty much seen every single player play live minus Owen Otasawi. So I feel irresponsible dissecting and saying, well, Charlie is this far off it or he's this close to it. That's what I meant by that question. But by the way, the club situation does not influence my opinion of any player. I don't care where they play. If they're a player, they are a player. Klein Art says, do you make any changes to players or tactics based on the score or time left in the game? If so, could you give some insight into who you would bring on or move around and what? Hey, Gabe, excellent question. Absolutely. You have to adapt within a game depending if you're winning or losing and what minute of the game it is and what the situation is, qualifying or league standing. There are so many variables and components. But yes, you have to be open to make changes. And with regards to this U20 team, I don't know, a couple examples I can give is I would bring in Oscar Cervantes or Cole Bassett for Efrain Alvarez or Indy Vassilev to strengthen the midfield. Both those players that I just named are much better in terms of defending set pieces and closing out games and those characteristics, for an example. If we're losing, I would substitute Cam Duke in for Julian Araujo, for example. And if somebody's not having a great game, I would go a little bit more offensive and bring on another forward and maybe take out a midfielder. So absolutely, you have to be flexible, but that is a very good question, Gabe. Rat Dog. I like that. The Rio Rat Dog. Do you see Alex Mendes cracking the top player pool? How would you develop the senior team for 22? And can you foresee a starting 11 in 22? Pulisic, Gianluca, do you put one at the 9 or move one to another position? Do you have any chance of being on the U.S. soccer staff? So, not really pertaining to the U20s, so I'm not going to go at length here. I like what you said about Pulisic, Gianluca. So if you have great players, you find a way to get them all on the field together. So absolutely, you figure it out. Drop one into midfield, play one at the false 9. You figure it out. If the player disparity is that massive, when you have talents like these, you figure it out to get those guys on the field. That is the short answer to that. Do I have any chance on being on the U.S. soccer staff? Lord, hear your prayer. That's my dream. So hopefully I'm given an opportunity here sooner than later to help graduate us, per se. Good questions. Alex Mendes cracking the top player pool. Excellent player. I know him better than most, so I think Alex has a bright future. He's with the U23s, the Olympic team now. He's on Young Ajax, their reserve team. Crystal ball, if everything pans out right, I see him with a bright future representing the U.S. and Ajax first team football. Jason Tenner, what are your thoughts on the potential of Will Trapp as a 6 for the USMNT? I know it's tough to evaluate a player in isolation, so perhaps with Adams as the 8 and Mendes as the 10. Holy cow, here we go, another USMNT question. Not part of the topic, I'll give you a short, sweet answer. Will Trapp, much like I named Sebastian Lletget in the past, is a very good possession player, okay? He keeps it simple, he retains possession. His passing percentage is probably very, very good. I have no idea off the top of my head. And it's another player that is intelligent and has technique. It's not special. There's nothing special about Will Trapp. But two things I want to address here. One, I take Will Trapp 10 out of 10 times over Weston McKennie, like I said last week about Bradley and Nagby. Okay, why? Because I already told you. He has technical attributes and he's smart. He can move the ball. Okay. The other hypothetical I want to throw, I kind of threw it about Jossie. What if, would we all be up in arms, would the critics be as massive as they are, if Will Trapp and his pedigree was different, per se? If Will Trapp played for Sporting Lisbon and not Columbus Crew or not Inter Miami, would people be knocking him? If Will Trapp didn't have a history of playing for Gregg Berhalter, would people be knocking him like they do? Hey, that's a good question. What if he played for Real Sociedad? Would we view him with the same lens and say, oh, this guy's a disaster, we got to graduate, got to move on, he's not good enough, he's too slow, he's not athletic? Would we say all these things? Or would it be the same thing? Wow, he's playing at a top European club. Pedigree, pedigree, pedigree. That's my hypothetical. That's my question to you guys, okay? Hopefully that's food for thought. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's a very technical midfield. It's an intelligent midfield. It's a good pairing, good balance in that midfield, Jason Tenner. Let's get who's this? Baba's ex-foe. And it says, at Salvi Love. Ooh, little indirect there maybe. Let's get Efraim back with the U.S. Bunch of U.S. soccer flags, as you guys see. You think he will get more minutes with the Galaxy? So, hey, I'm with you. Let's get him back, all right? I'm all aboard that train. Will he get more minutes with the Galaxy? To be determined. We don't have football right now. I think the excuse last season and previous season is he's young, he's got time. You know, the same things we say, not athletic enough, slow, X, Y, Z. He's with Mexican national team. He's missed too many training days. He doesn't have continuity with the group. All the excuses in the past are in the past. Let's see if moving forward, he is valued for what he is, the unique talent that he brings to the table, his match-winning qualities. I've talked about Efra too long, so we won't go into that. I hope he gets minutes. He needs minutes. He will boss the MLS. Give him 5 to 10 straight starts, independent of his success in those first 5-10 games. Give him 5 to 10. Give him that continuity, and he will light this league on fire. The time and space allowed for this creative force to be on the field, it will be easy, just like USL was when he was 15, just like U Soccer was. He translates, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see how it works out. We'll revisit that in time. Next one is black and red, or red and black, Milan forever. All right. Do you believe Alex Mendes will finally break out for young Ajax next season? Because this season, he only made 11 starts out of 22 games he has played, and he didn't produce much goals and assists like Ryan Gravenberch and Jurgen Egleka produced. Good question, Milan forever. Do I, in a short and sweet, it's off topic. Yes, I think he will break out, per se, at young Ajax and have himself a good season. The players you named, good point. Listen, this is great for Alex's development. This is real competition. He's faced against high level, 2000, another fellow 19-year-old, Jurgen Ehlkamp, incredible Dutch talent. He's faced a competition with the next Paul Pogba. This guy's incredible. If you ever see Ryan Gravenberch play live, special talent. This is who he's competing against week in and week out to get minutes, to make the jump. So this is excellent. This is a competitive environment where we can always say it's lacking here in the United States. It's not. It comes a lot easier to the young talents. So he's in a good place. Yes, the short, sweet answer. Michael Cannell. I hope I said that right. What are some specific things you look for or focus on in evaluating players for the style of football you want your teams to play? How does it affect your ability to evaluate a player if he/she plays for a team with a different style from how you want to play? Incredible question, Michael. So, man, I'm having flashbacks of all my times sitting down and watching games, youth games, high-level academy games. So, listen, rain or shine, I'd be there with my umbrella, freezing, hot, cold, sweating. End of story is this. I have a very, very clear vision for what I want in every single one of my player profiles. So right away when I go and I see something unique, or if I've already gone with a certain player in mind and I spotlight, yeah, it's very clear to me. I don't care if he's playing on the most terrible, or he or she are playing on the most terrible shit team on the planet. I could see how they receive the ball, how they play the ball. Do they scan? Do they see? Do they see 3, 4, 5 moves ahead? Are they intelligent? Their technique. I can see those things right away and how they could plug in and play. Their defensive tendencies. Do they have natural tendency to want to repress? Do they get pissed off when they lose the ball and they want it back? Are they up in arms when they lose the ball, or lazy? Like, you see it right away, and when I see a player that excites me, like, it's so incredible how you just plug and play. I could envision him stepping into my team tomorrow, even though he may not be in the best situation. So I think to answer your question, Michael, is if you have clarity and you know what you want, it doesn't matter when you go and watch. You have to have clarity in terms of the players you like, the profile you like, and how they would plug into your system or style of play. AC says, why are you desperately trying to recoup Efra? He seems very comfortable with Mexico and they showed him love from day one. So AC, the truth seeker. It's not that I'm desperately trying to recover Efra. I am desperately wanting our country to advance on the soccer, on the global game and the stage. I want us to, take that next step forward. I want us to graduate, per se, like I said. I want to compete on the world stage. I don't want to miss World Cups. I want the right players to be selected, the technical ones, the tactical ones. And listen, Efra fits that criteria. He will graduate us to the next level. He will make our U20 pool and beyond much better. So it's not about me being obsessive or desperate to try to recoup him. And yes, Mexico did show him love. They followed the right blueprint to successfully secure his services. So the blueprint is there. Now it's our turn. It's our turn. He's not cap tied. Let's go and get him. I went into whatever it was, a 15, 20-minute episode on this, so I won't waste more of my parched voice here. So I hope that answers your question. We'll take a quick swig, but the next question is Alex Leak. Is Sargent the 9 of the future for the USMNT? I happen to think so. I happen to think no. What are your thoughts? Is Werder Bremen hindering his development? So give me 1 second, Alex. I am a Josh Sargent fan. I've seen him play since he was at St. Louis Scott Gallagher and his club setup with all our youth national teams since he was 14 years old. He has a good skill set. His hold-up play is good. His technique is good enough. He's a goal scorer. His movement is good in and around the box. So listen, he's got a ways to go to be a world-class number 9. But I think between him and between the skill set that Sebastian Soto brings and his mobility and his runs in behind, and when you have like a false 9 that we just tried with Jesus Ferreira, who is more technical than both those guys, can link up a little bit better with the more technical players that could potentially be around him. We have 3 different skill sets to hopefully put Jossie Sardes in the rearview mirror, and sooner than later Josie, who's still as of today the number 9, in the rearview mirror. So I like Josh's game in terms of hindering development. It's so easy now, guys. Werder Bremen is shit. They're in a terrible situation. They're relegation scraps. Josh sometimes gets scrappy minutes. The ball doesn't find him. Sometimes he was deployed on the wing. Listen, I don't follow Werder Bremen enough to give an opinion on his club situation. All I know is the casual fans, the majority of people that I hear is like, oh, he's in a shit situation. He's got to get out of there. He's got to go somewhere else. Or maybe now in 2 Bundesliga, he'll get his fair shake and he'll get to play. Listen, every situation is unique. Josh will figure it out, or the people that work with Josh need to figure it out. But I think Josh is a talent that's going to continue to develop and help our USMNT. Joseph, question is, Gianluca Busio is/was a favorite of Peter Vermees and Wiki, yet some do not rate him. Can you talk a bit about his strengths, flaws, and things he needs to improve in order to make Brian's roster? Oh, we talked about Brian's roster. All right. Hopefully I'm taking over here, Joseph. So first off, I have no idea if this is a favorite player of Vermees or Vicky. That's just an assumption. I don't know that to be a fact, okay? In terms of his skill set, I don't know if I talked about Gianluca. It's another player that, as a youth guy, I thought he was very talented. If I rewind to a tournament back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe less, Cayman Islands, we went to an international tournament. Gianluca Busio guest played that tournament with the Seattle Sounders. It's a player that I liked, a player that I thought was technical, that had a little bit of tools that could continue to develop under, our system and our stuff at the Galaxy. I made an initial approach, seemed like he was interested. But again, we didn't have a housing situation to take care of the player. He ended up in Kansas City. Fast forward to today and what I see of Gianluca from his youth national team performances and his performances in MLS and USL, he's just not special, guys. Comparing him to the players ahead of him in midfield in this pool, he doesn't have high-level athleticism. He is not athletic, okay? He doesn't even have that component. His technique is okay, and his soccer IQ leaves a lot to be desired. He's not the smartest guy. He doesn't make the best decisions on the field. So he just doesn't have any of the 3 components at a high level to be somebody that graduates us in the international stage at the U20 level and beyond. So it's not somebody who I think will help us take that next step. Can he have a good MLS career? Probably. Can he, make a transfer overseas? Maybe. Time will tell. But in terms of him being a type of player, a profile that's going to graduate us to the next level, very, very little chance. Just my opinion. Eli GC says, hey Brian, is there an overlap between World Cup qualifiers, the Olympics, and the U20 World Cup? Which one would you prioritize for guys like Gio, Uli, and Julian, who might have a chance to play up an age group or two? Also, who else do you think could play up if needed? So, if there is overlap, my opinion is Gio and Uli, should be with the USMNT if there's overlap. Then you talk about someone like Julian. I don't think Julian is the profile of player that is ready to play on the USMN team today, and I don't think he's actually the profile to graduate us to the next level. He is a solid guy for our U20s. Beyond that, we will wait and see how that pans out for him. Because again, Julian is nasty. He's tackle. He's tough. He brings all the attributes that we've had historically. Athletically, he is very good. Technically, he is average. In terms of tactically and having a high-level soccer IQ, it's not there at the highest levels for Julian. So Julian's a guy that would be a lock for our U20s, in my opinion. And then the other two guys, if there's conflicts, they need to play for the USMNT in qualifiers and or the Olympics if there are those conflicts you suggest. Good question, Eli. Jack Fritzadelphia is legendary. Oh, here we go. How motherfucking pissed are you with the way Wolfsburg is handling Uli? Does it scare you with Kobe and Kayo going there next year too? Oh my goodness. Okay, so first off, Uli, straight up, I'm not pissed, okay? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Uli is going to make a first team debut in the near future. I don't know if it'll be in weeks, months, or years, but he will play first division football and he will have a good career, like all players, knock on wood, if he stays hungry and strong and injury-free. I think the notion that you have to make a debut at 18 or 17 or 19 is just absurd, guys. I mean, listen, there's very few situations where that happens. And I could just think of high-level guys who made debuts later. Sergio Busquets, didn't debut at Barcelona until he was 20 years old on the first team. He turned out okay. Luka Modric didn't debut till he was 20 years old in Dinamo Zagreb. He turned out okay. I don't know. I've been following Ajax a lot recently. Hakim Ziyech, okay, talented, incredible wizard winger, now transferring to Chelsea. He didn't debut till he was almost 20. He was 19 and getting closer to 20 for lowly or lower Dutch tier club, Hennerven or whatever the way you say it. So listen, bottom line is you have to be ready to seize your opportunity. Okay, any high-level player has to be ready to seize their opportunity. If you want to talk about Uli and his situation, he was ready and seized his opportunity in January for the USMNT. Okay, because if he laid an egg, then nobody be talking about Uli, nobody be saying he should be playing first-team football and all the things that go around with it. Roberto says, your honest take on profile versus pedigree made me reconsider a lot of how I think about the current national team player pool. How absolute would you be on this? What would be your philosophy on role players or changing the system in order to get results in certain scenarios? I think I kind of answered that question, Roberto, earlier today, but I'll touch on it very briefly. Pedigree means nothing to me, okay? Player profile in terms of their characteristics is what I focus on and what we should focus on if we want to make the next step. And I'm going to keep beating that drum all day today. We all say we want it. If we want to graduate, intelligence, soccer IQ, and technique, okay? Athleticism, great, but we can't sacrifice the other two. As it pertains to our pool, yeah, you have to adapt. You have to have some types of role players. You can't have, listen, Barcelona doesn't have 10 Messis in the field. The next guy that comes on, if it's a winger currently with Dembele injured, is Ansu Fati. And Ansu Fati is not Messi, or when he subs in for Griezmann. Ansu Fati is not Griezmann. Different profile, okay? So we could go on and on about this. The Phil Foden on City, different type of profile compared to Silva. Similar, but different. And sometimes you have to see out a result. They would bring on Fernandinho to see out a result. Barca would bring on Paulinho to grind it out. Most recently, Vidal would come in for, Artur and just be stronger in midfield. So yes, there has to be tactical flexibility in terms of what's going on in the game, what the objectives are the game, where your league standing is, what if it's a short tournament like a World Cup or qualifiers, what the standing looks like, squad rotation. There's just so many variables to consider, Roberto. So good question, good point. I hope I helped answer that to an extent. Next one is, here we go, guys. We're getting down to, I think, the final few. Most dual nats, when asked if they're influenced by other dual nats decisions, will say no. It's my choice to make. And he put a la Pepe in a certain article on onegoal.us. Fair to say public, but in reality, how much do you think their peers' choices weigh in on a player's futures? Hard for me to say, Alex. Again, when it comes to each individual player, I think it's a personal choice, and I really, truly believe that. Where your heart lies, right? Where you want to play football, what the football is like, what the sales pitch from the federation, in this case, is like. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like your skill set is conducive to success? Do you see yourself wearing that jersey? There's just so many things and variables that go into it, but I always think it's a personal choice. What we can do as a federation is do what I said. Show unconditional love. When you're competing for someone's services, which is something historically we frowned upon and didn't want to do and would use the excuse of, oh, his heart was set somewhere else. That's bullshit, in my opinion. You go and you compete for a player's services. What happened with Serginho? We competed and we won, and we're all ecstatic about that. As it pertains to Jonathan Gonzalez, I won't revisit it. We lost. Efrain Alvarez is still an open case, and there's so many Mexican-American talents that we have to secure, not because we want to secure them in Mexico, not have them, because we believe in their abilities. So I think I've covered that to an extent here in our U20 series. As it pertains to our U20s, I just mentioned Efra as a dual nat, and we have to go get him back. Coach Rogers says, Brian, I want us to have creative players in midfield like Ozil, Cesc, Santi Cazorla. Heck, I'll even take a Jack Wilshere talent. Sounds like Efra is this type of player. Are we ever going to pick these creative types in the U.S.? Híjole, sounds like you are an Arsenal fan. And I never considered Arsenal to have such incredible midfielders. That's a good little roster there. Ozil, Cesc, and Santi Cazorla. What a midfield that would be, if they all were at the prime in the same situation. So to answer your question, man, I went into depths about this. You name some of those Arsenal guys, and those guys are brains and technique to a whole different level. Athletically, Cesc Fabregas, average athlete. Ozil, average. Santi Cazorla, average. 5'5", 5'4". I don't know how tall Santi is. Jack Wilshere, a unique English talent. Different type of player profile than they're used to producing. But listen, I'll liken it to all the examples I used in one of the previous episodes. I think it was the last one when I compared our athletic guy, Western type, compared to the international successes that you see across the board. Your Verrattis, your Iniestas, your De Jongs, all these types of players. Somebody who I want to highlight is, based on your question, is Andrea Pirlo, for example, okay? A snail. This guy is a snail, okay? Yet, surrounded by other guys with good technique, surrounded by other guys with soccer brains and IQ, he fits in just right fine when he was at AC Milan, winning Scudettos, lifting the Champions League trophy. He fit in just fine at Juventus, winning Scudettos left and right, getting tired with Pogba and with Arturo Vidal in midfield. He fit in just fine, winning the World Cup and lifting the trophy as a snail on the field. So, to answer your question, I wish we would move in the right direction and graduate, because you think about when Pirlo came to the MLS and people said, maybe he's too old, he's retiring. No, yeah, he was towards the end of his career, but people weren't on the same page. The soccer IQs weren't aligned. He was playing with players that were incompetent. He would pick up his head and filter a ball, and the forward would have no clue what's going on. And it was like, what's Pirlo doing playing a ball into dead space there? No, Pirlo knew what he was doing. It's the other guy that didn't know. So, guys, we have these types of players. They've been overlooked. I'm being sincere here. People may say, Brian, you're full of BS. We don't have these types. We have Pirlos. We've had them across the board. They've been ignored, okay, in detriment to the athlete. We have to move in the right direction. If we want to compete, if we want to take the next step, if we want to lift trophies, we need more Pirlos and less. You know what I mean? All right, good question. Beto says, hey Brian, I'm a first generation American of Mexican parents. As a USMNT supporter, I gotta say I find absolutely unacceptable, capital letters, that the U.S. has failed to produce a legit star of Latino descent in decades. Going back to Claudio Reyna, do you see that changing? So, Lord, hear your prayer, Beto. Listen, to me, it does not matter what ethnicity, what background you have. Do you have these characteristics that's gonna graduate us, okay? Yes, I agree with you. We haven't had too many players of that nature, Hispanic descent, being promoted and playing in our professional environments, in our college environments, and much less in the national team environments. I see it, the trend changing a little bit over the years, and hopefully we do have a Latino guy that that the Latino American population can get behind. But bottom line, guys, I could think back to incredible players, like Kellen Rowe per se, or Darlington Nagbe. That I watched Kellen Rowe when he played at UCLA, and what an incredible, incredible player. Smooth, technical. He looked like he was floating on water as he'd play. But look what, our environment has done to Kellen Rowe. He didn't graduate. He didn't go nowhere. He's, had a few seldom opportunities, and look where he is today. Invisible. I think he's in New England now. Look at Darlington Nagbe, okay? Again, smooth, technical, brains. He doesn't go win your headers. He doesn't go win bone-crunching tackles. He's not the guy that everybody spotlights. And I don't know the internal situation as to why he refuses call-ups or if he even gets called up or valued. But bottom line, Darlington Nagbe could have been ridiculous generational guy for our USMNT. And for some reason hasn't been. Okay? We have to move in that direction, whether they're Latino, whether they're white, whether they're Asian, black, I don't care. Okay, we have to move in the right direction and graduate. Hopefully, for your sense, Beto, so you can get behind it, we can have a player of Mexican American descent graduate and represent our USMNT to your delight. Jaime Fana says, how do you rate Conrad de la Fuente? Is he in the conversation to start for the U20? So I mentioned Conrad as part of our depth in terms of being a bench player for this pool. How does he rate? Listen, Conrad has unique gift to take players on 1v1, okay? The problem is the what next. When he gets in those final positions, in the final third, and has to deliver the final ball, it's usually not to the quality you'd expect of a player that plays at FC Barcelona, U19s, or now the reserve team. He has a long way to go. He doesn't see it. He doesn't have clarity in the final third. His finishing leaves a lot to be desired as well. So we saw him in our previous U20 World Cup in Poland. I think it was unfair because he arrived injured to that tournament. But it'll be interesting to see what Conrad does in the future. I think he's somebody that helps us in the CONCACAF qualifying tournament. I don't think it's a talent that translates to the USMNT, but he's going to be depth for our player pool. I hope that answers your question, Jaime. Ooh, here we go, guys. I don't know how some of these guys do this, these Q&As, these press conferences for hours. Stefan Damore says, you made some great points about how you rate players and their replacements compare. My question is what, in your opinion, would directly contribute to developing / improving the quality of depth we have behind the top players? Here we go. Talking about depth, listen, it's very important. This is something that I have not expressed. It's very important when you select these players and you bring them into your team environment. There's players, we're talking national team here, okay? Even as a club scouting situation, it's the same thing. You can see a player that is talented, that you like, that fits the profile of what you want. Then you get them into your environment. And sometimes they're not very coachable, meaning they can't take information, tactical information, retain it, and then implement it on the field, which is the most important thing as you get to the higher levels of football, okay? It just doesn't happen sometimes. So in terms of getting good depth and all that, it'll be very interesting when you have the selection, the team with you, and you work. Because sometimes it doesn't pan out how you envision it in terms of your starting 11. Tournament football. Let's talk about tournament football. Usually, I'll say usually, almost every single time, if you analyze tournament football, the starting 11 on match day 1, the first pool play game, isn't the same team that you end up fielding towards the later stages of a tournament. So the depth is very, very important. It's important to have quality players that fit your vision, and then role players like people have suggested with their questions. I hope that answers your question a little bit there, Steven. Whoo! Jerry Agostino says, Brian, for those of us who lack a tactical background, how should we watch these games to determine whether or not the U.S. teams are actually following tactics, building an identity? In other words, how do we become smarter fans? Holy cow, where do I start here? Listen, I don't know. I just think of, let me just regurgitate what I think. Obviously, to me, it just comes something natural now. I don't think about it anymore. I just spotlight certain situations within a game. The best way I could describe it is when you watch a game, whether it's live or on TV, try not to watch the entire thing ball driven. Don't follow the ball. Try and see the entire blob, I call it, like all 11 players, right? To get a tactical concept of what is going on. If you're ball watching, you don't see certain things in terms of player movements, tendencies, patterns, whether that's on the offensive side or the defensive side. So I guess my first initial thing is do not ball watch. 2, something that I've learned watching hundreds and thousands of hours of analysis, and I'm talking about high-level analysis overseas. You know, there's some programs in South America, in Argentina, where I followed it since I was a young pup, and even in the European market, true specialists. They break down the game and they let you know what's going to happen before it actually happens on the pitch. Okay, these analyses are very, very good. What we're used to here in the US is maybe they show you a specific analysis and they kind of just highlight what's happening. They don't predict. They don't tell you exactly how to see it live time and what to expect, and then dissect it all the more afterwards. So it's very important to watch high-level analysis, in my opinion. And man, this is just a crazy question, Jerry. You caught me off guard. I'm gonna have to process it further and get back to you on that. But you're off to a great start. You're following this. You're watching these videos. So hopefully this helps a little bit. Oh, we have another page. Okay. Pat Keith says, thanks for these great episodes. Appreciate you distinguishing the type of players that will fit the identity that GB has said he wants for a USMNT to have. My question, do you think what the USL is launching, I don't know what article you attached, will ID more of these players? So I'm assuming you're saying the league that is being launched. Pat Keith, so listen, I think the US has taken a giant step in its initiative to develop players and have an academy and have youth programs set up. So yes, it's going to help identify a larger pool of players. To identify players that translate to our USMNT, that's a whole process. I think I've discussed this at length. The environment is everything. Okay, one thing is to ID a good player and then having them constantly in a good environment, day in and day out, where every session is a war in terms of getting good tactical content, the intensity. All those things have to happen in your daily environment, and there's very few environments across our country that are conducive to producing high-level players. I think I rattled them off recently. I won't touch that now, but it's good because, you know, the more programs, the better. The more professional programs, the better. So, yes, Pat, moving in the right direction. The notorious USMNT. I like the snippet on Agüero and how we praise McKinney because he's in Europe. Okay, yeah, pedigree. I know how Barca won everything with players like Iniesta, not incredible athletes. But in the modern game, is it ideal to have a variety of players, some more athletic and some more technical? Man, listen, in my opinion, no, you cannot have weak leagues. Okay, so again, let's tackle the topic threefold. There is the athletic component, which I don't want to neglect. It's important. In the perfect storm, you have all three things, okay? But you cannot sacrifice technique and soccer brains and IQ just for athleticism. That's what I will not do, okay? I will sacrifice a little bit of athleticism if you have the other two components. That is what the high-level players have across the board, all across the globe. The high-level international national teams, Those players have brains and IQ, and they have technique. Talking about club football, the highest level clubs and the best clubs in the world, and the best players that play for those clubs have these two components. It's a bonus if you could have all three. You know, I mentioned Busquets and Yaya Touré. Yaya Touré is the perfect player per se, right? He's an athlete. He's got good technique. He's got good soccer IQ. But he got displaced by Busquets, who is incredible in terms of his technique, incredible in terms of his IQ, and shocking athlete. So let me give you this analogy. If we have one weak link on the field, I said, it kills everything when you try to have a team that bosses a game, all right? Let's just suggest. So let's use USMNT players. And I think I threw this out in a different question earlier. I don't want to crush McKinney. I told you McKinney's a good pro. He's going to have a good European career. He's just not the profile to get us to the next level. If McKinney was planted into Liverpool's midfield, and I don't know, Aaron Long was planted into Liverpool's central defense in the Dutch guy's position. And if Jordan Morris was put in Mo Salah's place, does Liverpool, dominate? Do they boss games? Because Liverpool does boss games. Contrary to your rock and roll, run and gun football, they boss games, almost every single one of them, okay? Would it be the same with those three weak links, technically and soccer IQ-wise, on the field? The answer is no. You have one weak link, you are in big trouble, guys, at the highest levels. So variety, in my opinion, cannot occur if it's going to sacrifice the components that are so essential in the technique and the soccer IQ. Okay, we cannot have that. I hope that answered your question. To graduate. Oh, here we go. Is McKinney still valuable at all in a possession-based system? We've seen his poor decision-making and passing and losing markers before, but he's had some good moments. Is he going to help us graduate? So, man, I don't want to keep going on this McKinney thing. I think last weekend was a good example of what he is and what he isn't, okay? He was incredible putting out fires, intercepting passes, winning dual clearances, and that's Weston's game, right? But you kind of summed it up. He's not a possession-based player. He doesn't see the game. He doesn't have the brain. He doesn't have the decision-making. He doesn't have the technique. He looks like a fish out of water. He got the ball in a couple of certain situations where he was shocking. And people want a slight shock. Oh, he plays for a shit team. Guys, he is not the type of player to graduate us to the next level. Is there a role for Weston? Yeah, there's always a role, right? We discussed that over the course of this Q&A. Hey, would I substitute Weston McKinney in the dying stages of a game that's a must-win game, or we have a point and we need that point to help us grind it out and smash some people with some tackles and clear some balls and win some set-piece defense? Yeah, 100%. I'll sub him in, but he cannot be the guy that's going to lead our midfield like he's been doing, or like it's being suggested that he should. End of story. Not if we want to move forward. We all want to move forward, okay? This is my opinion, but guys, on the global context, just compare. Weston is not the profile of player to get us to the next level. End of story. Nick Van Heest. Hi, Brian. How would you rate this starting 11 in context of the global elite? For example, I'm a huge Gio fan and would still rate him highly, while Araujo/Indy might be best we've got at the right back/8 spot. But I think they'd struggle or would be targeted by France's and Spain's of the world. Oh, this is a very good question, Nick. Listen, I'm going to address the targeting thing because as a coach, I study my opponents and I would target their weaknesses. End of story. So you're talking about, Gio being of the level to compete on the global context. I agree. U20 football, Gio is at the level. Do we have a few guys that are not? Maybe. So if I was coaching against the U.S. and this starting 11 that I named was the team on the field, I would 100% not want Kobe and Leo on the ball. I would force the ball to the other side. I would set traps by starting positions of my players that Ochoa and company or Booth or anybody in open play would negate the ball going up our left channel. It has to go to Julian. It has to go to Owen, who are weaker per se. So yeah, when you play Spain, who has high-level coaching, that's what happens. When you play I don't know the U20 head coaches across the globe, but when you play people that have that tactical acumen and study you and break it down, they'll see the weakness and they will try to expose you 100%. So yeah, listen, do we have a few weak links to compete with France and Spain? If we want to boss a game, 100%, guys. Listen, I want us to graduate to the next level. Are we going to do that overnight? Are we going to displace Brazil and Spain and Argentina and Germany and Italy and whoever else I may have, Holland? No, it's not going to happen overnight. But if we pick these right players, if we implement this identity that the leadership is telling us about, we will be able to graduate and crush our region easily and be able to knock off the second tier countries, right? The ones that we still struggle with immensely on a consistent basis. That's what I want on the short term. Big picture, hey, sky's the limit. Sky is the absolute limit. So again, time will tell. We will see when it pertains to this U20 group, like I suggested, come January, who is picked? Is it the athletics? Is it, without sliding, guys, is it these athletic center backs that can't play a ball if they're life dependent on it? We want to play possession football? No, it all breaks down. It's done. Is it another goalkeeper, not Ochoa? No, game over already. If we're not going to put on a technical midfield and we're going to put on guys that have no clue, we're done. We're not going to compete. We're going to be the same old, if that. If we're going to put on strikers or wingers that have no tactical concept and their decision making is shocking and they just put their head down and run, no, guys, we're not going to move forward. So that's the thesis of this conversation, guys. I hope everybody enjoyed this U20 series. I think that was it for the questions. I have enjoyed myself. You have no idea. This is not going to be a short-term quarantine type thing. This is going to continue to progress forward. I want to talk football. I want to share. I want to receive, and I want to learn and grow myself. So I hope we continue to have these interactions. Please shoot in some follow-ups in terms of what you guys would like to see. There was a whole lot of USMNT content that people seem to be thirsty for. And listen, we all want the same thing. Let's take that step forward together. Let's not just be talking about it. Let's make this step and demand excellence from our USMNT and beyond. The leadership has stated this is the direction we're heading. Let's hold them accountable now. Okay? Hey, things take time. It is a process. It's not an overnight thing. But these small little things, such as our U20s and the player selection and what players are being overlooked, we can't do that anymore. We have to graduate as a footballing country. That's my desire. That's everybody's desire. Let's get on board together. Let's keep driving this thing forward. All right, I hope you enjoyed.